You're listening to The Real Investment Show.
And welcome to Financial Fitness Friday. I'm Rich Rosso, CFP, here with Danny Max Headroom Ratliff. In the little computer, CFP squared. How are you this morning, sir?
Doing well. How about you?
Do you know the personal savings rate is back down to 7.5% from roughly over 33% in April of 2020. It seems like all the frenzy in spending might be coming to an end, and people are going to have to depend on their payrolls to make ends meet. Speaking of that, average hourly earnings month over month expected today, October 4.7%, still will not keep up with the rate of inflation. Yesterday I had an interview with one of the local stations about inflation, and Danny, we're talking about the stated rate of inflation, 5% or so. And obviously, when you go to the store, you wish you had 5% inflation on several items, including dairy and meat, don't you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, costs are rising quickly. If you look back at September's numbers, I mean, food costs went up from 3% inflation to 4.5%. I mean, we're seeing that's probably one of the quicker trending areas that we're seeing inflation in.
Yeah, I think when you look at beef, I think it's up like 15% rents. If you want to keep a roof over your head, up an average 16% this year.
Yep.
So nice to get a raise, but it's not keeping up with inflation. Also, labor force participation rate expected 61.7, one of the lowest rates we've seen in a very long time. So we live in a little bit of a bizarro world where Buddy Hackett plays Superman instead of Chris Reeves. But, hey, it's the comedy. Hey, I actually found something interesting on social media, Danny, and how rare is that? But it might be a lesson.
Probably pretty rare.
Might be a lesson with the House expected to vote on Biden's spending agenda for $4 trillion. If you only had $30,000. Now, this is being accounted to by, Elon Musk is being credited with saying this. I don't think he said it. You wouldn't go out and buy a $30,000 car. Yet, if you had $30,000, you wouldn't go out and buy a $30,000 car. Yet, for some reason, people make $30,000 and go finance a $60,000 car. Credit made people forget common sense. And it's become the new normal. Monthly payments destroy your monthly cash flow. I like that. Remember, freedom is greater than luxuries. I don't think Elon Musk said that, but dang, whoever said it sounds good, doesn't it?
It sounds great. I mean, we've been taught to live on payments so rich. I mean, it's so difficult to do.
Well, think about hey, Danny, I'm going to go buy a $300,000 car, and it's not going to cost me a darn thing because I think I'll work another 30 years. I'll just crawl in here out of the grave and pay for that darn car. But it doesn't cost me anything. Households cannot follow the rules of the government when it comes to fiscal responsibility. We do not have an endless printing press in the attic or the basement. So what kind of example do our government officials provide, Danny, when they say to us, $4 trillion is not going to cost a thing?
Well, I think that's a poor example. Unfortunately, we all know, we should know, that it always costs something. There's always going to be that price of admittance here when it comes to what the government's doing. And the more money they spend, the more they're going to take from you in one way or another down the road.
Right.
And if you manage your household the way they manage theirs, we'd be in big time trouble, right? You'd be bankrupt. You'd be in jail. There could be a whole lot of negative connotations here.
Absolutely. Yet we seem to be following these rules. The entire society living on payments, because if you look at the tax plan, it's based on payments. We're going to estimate this amount of taxes coming in over this period of time. You're going into the void of the unknown, trying to figure out how to pay for something. And you can't go into the void of the unknown when it comes to payments or your household budget. Some of the greatest super savers in the world, and we know a lot of them, they don't look at payments. They look at the total cost of the item versus what they could have done with the money. Then they total up the interest they're going to pay, and they look at that in lump sum. It's funny, Danny, right? When you look at something in a lump sum, it's very different, isn't it?
Oh, I mean, it can be very scary if you're talking about what your payment is overall, especially when you start factoring in the interest factor. That can be a game changer on the perspective that it puts on people and their payments. But we've been taught, I mean, almost brainwashed over the years that payments are great. It allows you to get more now.
Right. I can go ahead and get that $60,000 car with $30,000, right? How far can I go with payments? 6 years? 7 years? They're talking about 50-year mortgage rate loans. Hey, just send it out to infinity. What else can you do? So you can't manage your budget like that. And the more payments you have, the more stuff you have, the less freedom you have. I worked with a young investor yesterday, new investor, and he's talking to me about payments and all that. And I said, I want you to think of every payment as a link in a chain. And that link in the chain is around your ankle. So how many links you got? And he goes, well, I never thought of it that way. Sometimes we have to paint the picture strongly for people to understand that monthly payments come with a cost, and it costs something to do it, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy there, Rich, because I mean, it really is that ball and chain type of aspect that, that freedom, and you're robbing from your future essentially of the things you want to do and the financial security.
Absolutely. Well, we didn't start with how the market's going to open, but NASDAQ will open strong. I think everything's pretty tempered this morning, Danny, waiting for the changes in non-farm payrolls today. 450,000 expected. We had 194,000 in September, so we'll see what October's numbers bring. That's going to be interesting. Frankly, I've given up guessing. I'm not really sure anymore. I just look at the numbers and then wait for Lance and Michael to decipher them more properly so that we can get a really good understanding of what's going on.
Yeah, the numbers have been all over the place, just like many of these things. I mean, they've underestimated, overestimated. Who knows where these things end up at this point? And we're seeing so many different people with different schools of thoughts and their own experience from a hiring perspective to, people that are getting out of the labor force. I mean, we've seen that quite a bit. And, are these people coming back? The Wall Street Journal had a big article about how they're going after ex-employees who quit during the pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, boy, what an interesting social experiment for social science of economics. Hey, when we get back, we're going to talk about 10 smart money moves to make right now before the end of the year here on the Financial Fitness Friday version of The Real Investment Show with Lance Roberts. To the gentleman in my neighborhood washing his car at 4:45 a.m., I salute you.
That's pretty impressive, Rich. It's kind of chilly down here.
I'm going to tell you, lots of overachievers. Lots of overachievers. 4:45, I thought I was seeing things. I'm like, no, that guy is washing his car in the dark. My neighborhood has no streetlights. They only have lamps on the front lawn. That's an edict. I'll sort of like it because nobody can find me. And to watch this dude wash his car at 4:45 this morning, I said, wow, is this a brain tumor? Am I seeing things?
Kind of makes you wonder who or what he hit last night. Washing off the evidence.
I was thinking maybe he was washing it for his wife who was complaining that she needed to use the card. I don't know. I was coming up with all. What is your story, sir? We'll have you on the show next week. So we do have a lot of year-end stuff. You're seeing a lot of year-end what to do in financial media. We have a year-end economic review with our guest barista, Lance Roberts, coming up on Saturday, November 13th. That is next week from 8 to 9 a.m. We started Candid Coffee during the pandemic as a way to, make decisions sitting across your kitchen table, sharing what your concerns were during the pandemic, where we never really quarantined healthy people before. What was the world going to be like? We still don't know. But we're here to help you make sense of it. And with the market doing what it's doing, what's in store maybe even for next year, we will share insights. I will, Danny will, and Mr. Roberts will, just to get you started on the right foot. And to also, sort of get your expectations in line. Cycles are very tough for us to interpret when they change, because current cycles are like tread marks on your brain, like going through the mud. And then they are imprinted. So when a cycle changes, we don't adjust very well to it. It's a little bit of a denial stage. And I think we're going to see that, say, for example, Danny, in real estate next year. I'm no real estate pundit, but from what I see and the experts out there that I trust that are very objective, they are seeing a slowdown in the real estate market for next year. And that people that have bought homes over the last year should expect to be somewhat disappointed in their either rate of appreciation or the fact that they might be at a loss on their property. Not to panic. They're not going anywhere, hopefully. So this is where cycles might change as the Fed has to decide what to do. Now, they're still a little bit in denial about inflation. They call it transitory. I call it suppository, and you'll guess why later. But there is much more of an inflation issue, Danny. And I think the Fed might have to move next year, even though they did not bring up anything about rate hikes, because Powell knows how to allay markets and keep them calm. But that could change things quite a bit for next year. But there are some things you can control, right?
Yeah, there are. I mean, obviously, these guys are in a bit of a conundrum. Speaking of the Fed and what they're going to do, Bank of England came out and said, everybody expected them to raise rates. They did not yesterday, and we saw their yields fell by 22 basis points. So, I mean, I think that, it's interesting. These are all the things that are out of our control, but there are things that we can do, Rich. And, those end of year tips, I think that most of you guys probably know them. But it's always good to have a refresher, just a kind of a memory jogger. You wrote a really nice article on that last week. Yeah. Just kind of laying it all out. Hey, here's the foundation of the things that you need to be doing over the next 2 months to make sure that, one, you're taking advantage of all that you can for 2021, and then two, you're setting yourself up for success in 2022, which is extremely crucial because, we talk about all these things that are just way out of our control, but these are the things and the behaviors that you can do to make sure that you're doing all you can for you and your family.
Absolutely. And these are things that should bolster your household balance sheet, help you get prepared fiscally for next year, get your ducks in a row before the new year is upon us. And one is to max out your HSA contributions for 2021. I talk to more people, especially younger workers, who are getting more excited about the HSA. This is a pre-tax savings miracle account, because what other vehicle allows investors to sock money away triple tax free? Now, they have caught on. If you look at the number of health savings accounts, they are exploding, now exceeding 30 million. So obviously, Danny, this has caught on, and they link to what we call high deductible healthcare plans. And if you look at stats on the number of high deductible healthcare plans and the growth in that particular benefit, it's shocking. And Danny, we talked about this all the time, right? Employees are going to shoulder a big part of the burden of healthcare costs through the health savings accounts. Now, what I don't know, and I'm sure it's out there from Kaiser and some other groups, Devener and others, how people use these health care or these health savings accounts. They use them, I think, more like spending accounts, don't you?
Yeah, they're typically used inappropriately, unfortunately. This is almost equivalent to the shift back in the 80s from, defined benefit plans, the old school pensions,
Yeah,
to
right.
defined contributions, the 401ks, right? The employers are passing that cost on. And so now the employees are bearing the brunt of it. But these HSAs are a great vehicle to put these funds away. And so, I think the misinformation or just the lack of information that is like the flexible spending account that you have to spend it each and every year,
Right.
it's unfortunate. So I feel like we need to do a better job as an industry, really letting people know, hey, this is a fantastic tool. Understand the costs that you're going to have in retirement that are, a lot of it's going to be healthcare driven. So if you could put these funds aside, this is, Rich knows this is my favorite account. I could talk about this for days because this is the only account that's going to give you that triple tax benefit. You put the funds in tax-free, they grow tax-free, assuming you use them for medical expenditures. You're going to pull them out tax-free. So this is great. So you can't put a ton into it. $3,600 for an individual, $7,200 for a family. Max this thing out. This is fantastic. And don't use it. Even better, if you can spend, any medical expenditures you may have, those costs, pay them out of pocket, let those funds grow. You will thank yourself later in life. I mean, this is one of the best tools I think that's out there.
I think so too. And to your point, Danny's not fun at parties because all he talks about is HSA. It's like, do we invite Danny again?
Yeah,
Because he keeps talking about these health savings accounts. I mean, is there anything else going on? How are the kids, Danny? Well, they don't have HSAs, so we're not really going to talk about them today.
I do get the family.
Well, that's fine.
The family plan, but yeah.
But you do have a family.
I should be a paid spokesman.
Yeah, you would be a good spokesperson for them. But your contribution limits for this year: 3,600 individuals, 7,200 for families, with a catch-up contribution of $1,000. So if you haven't maxed it out yet, you still have time. We look at these as healthcare retirement savings accounts. To Danny's point, we want those contributions to stay there, even though it sounds strange. Wait, I'm supposed to use this. Well, it's not a use it or lose it kind of an account. So why not let it grow? Why not look at, and if you look at some of the leading choices out there for HSA accounts like HSA Bank, Fidelity has one. You can allocate among various mutual funds for a good percentage of the money. Why not just treat this as a retirement healthcare savings account? It connects to my 401k, my Roth 401k, but for healthcare expenses, possibly long-term care insurance premiums for a portion. So that's important. If you go to IRS publication 969, Danny's favorite, he's got a picture of it over his bed because it talks about HSA distributions. They can be paid. You can use them for Medicare premiums, all except Medigap. And I don't understand that, Danny, I guess because it's private insurance. Long-term care insurance premiums limited to a specific amount by age. So, for example, if you're age 61 to 70 years old, you can use up to $4,520 of an HSA distribution to pay for long-term care insurance premiums. So check out, max out your HSA. Next, replenish your emergency reserve and your financial vulnerability cushion, right? Danny, we talked about this having not just 6 months of living expenses, but 12 in a cash well. Because again, you may want the freedom to say with that additional 6 months is besides the air conditioner breaking down. What if you want to change careers, Danny? Right? What if you want to change career? What if you get let go from your job? You know what? The labor market is still in flux. There's still this transitional unemployment. Underneath the surface, I guess the unemployment rate looks fine. But underneath the surface, it's like a duck. On the surface, it's sort of calm, but there's a lot of movement underneath. There's a lot of paddling going on as to what's changing in the labor market, right, Danny? As far as how people want to work, when they want to work, the flexibility of work. These are all trends that were born. I think they started before the pandemic, but man, they sort of grew right through it, right?
Yeah, they really did. And, we were talking about this pre-pandemic. And I'd like to think that there was just a ton of people that were listening to us because so many people said, take this job and shove it, because evidently they had funds setting aside that they could utilize.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big change. We need to go above and beyond the traditional rules that the financial industry has set. And, if you really want to protect yourself, this is a fantastic way. Put those funds aside. That way that if, God forbid, you have an illness, you need to, you don't have disability insurance.
Right.
You have to pay out things out of pocket. You do have the air conditioner break at the same time. You have a number of other things happen. This is a way that you can protect your family.
Get it done.
And make sure that, you protect your lifestyle, really.
Yeah, when we get it back, we got more solid tips before the end of the year. Things you need to do here on the Financial Fitness Friday show of Lance Roberts' Real Investment Show. We'll be right back. Well, thanks to all our funny YouTubers this morning. JP, I think I'm gonna send a email to Powell. Suppository inflation as opposed to transitory. Yep, it's a real pain in the butt, this inflation, Danny. It really is. Now, speaking of happier thoughts, there is believe it or not, it's called the Strong, probably named after Mr. or Mrs. Strong, National Museum of Play in Rochester. And they have their National Toy Hall of Fame. I bet you can't guess who were the finalists this year. Well, actually, the winners. Sand is in the Toy Hall of Fame. Sand. The game.
In a sandbox.
Yeah. Well, because they're looking at creativity, right? I think appliance cardboard boxes should absolutely be, if they aren't already, in the National Museum of Play. Cabbage Patch Kids got turned down. How is that possible? That they should be in there. Fisher-Price Corn Popper. These are all nominees. The game Battleship. Now, American Girl Dolls got in this year as a winner. The Piñata. Oh, wow, there's a... I'd love to go to this museum. So this museum was established in 1998.
Okay, I was going to say it must have been rather new because some of these things have been around for decades. You would think they'd already been in there.
Yeah. So, again, toys that have inspired creativity. Unfortunately, I would think that their nominees are few and far between lately when you look at toys today compared to what we probably played with as children, right? I mean, like you found a cardboard box, you put a couple of them, you put them together, you create like a Halloween house, right? I used to use shoe boxes to create forts for my G.I. Joes. And, I don't know. I guess kids still do that, but I think cats are using the boxes more than kids are.
No, I think kids still do. I mean,
well, you would know better. Yeah. So kids still playing with that stuff?
Oh, yeah. It's a sin to throw a cardboard box out in this household. If you do, man, you start getting the kids coming after you. You better watch it. If you really want to harass somebody, though, especially if you have a child that's just walking, like a friend or family member, get them that little popcorn popper, that Fisher-Price one you mentioned.
I know.
That thing will run around all day, all night. You're like,
oh my God. I can hear it in my head from when Haley had it. And not only that, the vacuum cleaner from Fisher-Price used to do the same thing. And I couldn't vacuum the house without my daughter. She'd be like, Daddy, no, let me get mine first. And so, but can you hear that popper in your head?
It's the thing nightmares are made of. Yeah. Laying awake at night. Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, speaking of nightmares, no, this is not a nightmare. Could be if you have to pay taxes. But in the long term, it's a beautiful dream. A surgical Roth conversion, right? We discuss this all the time in our retirement right lane class. Diversification of accounts in retirement. Why do I want to just have a pre-tax account and I can't control my taxes when I look to recreate my paycheck? I want pre-tax accounts. I want after-tax accounts. I want tax-free investment accounts, right? So if I have multiple accounts in retirement, taxed differently, it allows for this crafting for a real tax-effective retirement income strategy. This magical pixie dust that gets placed on tax-deferred accounts by the financial industry is, it's finally getting a bit broken as Roth is getting talked about. What do you think?
If you look at the financial industry, I think you and I have our own thoughts of why it's never been pushed. Would they rather manage 100,000 or 85,000 or 80? It's counterintuitive for the industry as a whole to advocate for you to go ahead and pay taxes now, especially in an environment that we're in. Look, we're fortunate to have lower tax brackets at the moment. That, obviously that was set to expire in 2026. However, looks like it's going to be much sooner. As we're seeing the back and forth right now between politicians as far as raising taxes and what that may or may not look like. Now, I think that you have to be careful right now as far as what that means. I mean, we've talked about these Roth conversions for years, and it's an extremely beneficial tool for the future. But that could change depending on what taxes they do, come up with, because they are getting a little bit more creative. Luckily, it looks like the backdoor Roth conversion is still intact for the moment with the bills. But this is a great tool. It doesn't feel very good because, like you mentioned, you're going to have to pay taxes now. But later on, you're going to have the benefit of withdrawing these funds, if used properly, without paying taxes. And I mean, there's something to be said for that.
And this is why it's great for young investors. As a young investor in your 20s, you think that taxes are going to go lower in your lifetime. But boy, if you have just been, you're able to say you're starting with a company that has a Roth 401k instead of a traditional 401k. I mean, I think a lot of young people, when I talk to them, young investors, you probably get the same thing, Danny, because they've talked to other financial advisors, then they come to us and they scratch their head going, that's totally different advice. They're not telling me to fund the HSA. They're telling me to put all my money in pre-tax 401k, and you're out here telling me to do Roth. And I have to think this over because, I'm confusing them, right? So we see that eventually when you're not 25 anymore, you're 70, and it goes quickly. And if this money is for saving for retirement, let's get you the most tax efficient retirement, unless you feel by the time you're 70 years old, taxation on Social Security, IRMA on Medicare, overall federal income tax brackets are going to go lower, which I highly doubt. So you're a young investor, you can fund a Roth contribution, Roth traditional Roth IRA, $6,000. You can go ahead and maybe fully fund your Roth 401k contribution. The elective deferral limit is $19,500, catch up of $6,500 if you're 50 or older. So considering Roth in some form, if you can't do it for this year, look at it for next year.
Well,
now, yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's important to keep in mind as well. I think many investors think that, I can't fund a Roth 401k because, they're so familiar with the Roth IRA rules where you have income stipulations.
Right.
But the Roth 401k has no income stipulation, so anyone can go out and fund that. We also always think that we're going to retire in a much lower tax bracket. And we say, if I make $100,000 today, I need to have that in the future. And in fact, what we find is that we're not actually making $100,000 a day. By the time you back everything out, your benefits, the things you're paying for, those contributions that you may be making pre-tax. And so what we find is that, maybe it's not always created equally. So we have to change the way we think about, what we actually take home right now, what we're going to take home in the future. And then you may find that it's not all that different. And so it could be very beneficial.
Right, because I want more spendable dollars in retirement. I want the dollar to be $1. I don't want the dollar to be 70 cents, especially when I'm no longer a human earnings machine. Okay, I'm not making money here. I need every dollar to go as far as possible. So if I just consider the marginal tax bracket and I'm not looking at my overall marginal tax rate based on, 50 cents on the dollar for getting taxed on Social Security, up to 85 cents on the dollar for Social Security. I may not be in the 12% bracket. I might be in the 22% bracket if I'm taking into account taxation of Social Security, but we seem to look at that in a bubble, and you can't. So it's very important for younger people to look at their HSAs, Roth 401ks. And if you're older, if you're in retirement and you have to take your required minimum distribution, fill out up to the next tax rate. Do your conversions. It still could pay off. Every blog out there I read from financial pundits will look at this old traditional calculation in a bubble of, well, if you got to consider the taxes, how much it's going to make. Your tax bracket in retirement is obviously going to be lower. They totally ignore the integration of Social Security and Medicare into the equation, and it doesn't work. So tip
That's
4,
exactly right.
Yeah, the flexible spending account, right? Oh wait, well, yeah, you got another point, Danny? Go ahead.
Well, I think the other thing is that the legacy planning that has changed drastically over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And so now, your heirs cannot take an IRA over their lifetime, right? There used to be a life expectancy distribution. Now it's within a 10-year window. So you could make the argument that, when you pass, hopefully at an old age, your heirs are in their peak earnings season of their life.
Yeah.
And so maybe it would be more beneficial for them to have that in a Roth so that they start to take the distributions out within the 10-year window, but they won't be taxed on it. It won't be penalized. Therefore, it could go a lot further.
No, and it is one of the most simplest of legacy planning tools, to your point, which is great, that, hey, if my child's a doctor or a high income earner and I'm going to leave her X amount of dollars, and if she had to take them out of a pre-tax account over 10 years, that could really mess her up or mess him up, right? Here, at least, I have to still take it out over 10 years. She has to or he has to, but it's completely tax-free. Thank you, Mom and Dad. We get back.
Those dollars go a lot further.
They go a lot further. We get back. We're going to continue on our tips. 10 smart money moves to make before year end. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. So I'm going to put Danny on the spot. Danny, have you done your Christmas shopping yet?
I have started. Yes, sir.
Oh, right. Because there's a toy shortage. Can't get your... I don't think there's a favorite toy this year. I don't think there's like, oh my God, there's a Cabbage Patch doll or whatever it might be that's so popular. But obviously, you may have a problem finding your favorite, especially electronic toy.
No, that's absolutely true. And I can't remember if I was telling Lance on Wednesday or who I was talking with, but we were discussing, some of the shopping we've already done. And so Michelle said, hey, go ahead and start looking. And like, we don't have game systems or anything at our house for our kids. We're, it's pretty bad over here. Most people come over like, oh my gosh, what do the kids do? And
if I come back as a kid, I want these two to raise me, Brent.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't want. No, that's great. I think that's great. You're doing you're like China. You're like China cutting the kids off from gaming.
Yeah, well,
I got to come up with a name for you. Dictator, emperor. Okay.
Well, look, we want them to spark their own creativity and learn to do things on their own and build their imagination and not be glued to the TV or a game system. But, Michelle said, hey, look, let's break down and let's get them the really old school Nintendo.
Oh, yeah, the old ones.
So, like from the 80s.
The gray ones, the gray box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So you're not going to have all the violent things on there. I mean, it's going to be much better. And it's, very rudimentary compared to all the things that are out there now. So they'll probably get in and be like, I'm not playing with it.
Danny's kids are getting Pong for Christmas.
Hey, you never know. Dang it. They better not be listening. So
that was annoying too.
But to give you an example, Rich, if you go to Nintendo's website, I think it's like $59.99 or $69.99 for this.
That's
I went to look.
Smart idea. Yeah, go ahead.
But I went to go look everywhere to actually purchase it, and the cheapest I could find it was $183.
Wow.
So to give you an example, especially electronics, they are much more expensive. It is taking longer to receive them. A lot of places I went, I thought, wow, what's like a real system like this day and age go for? And most of those were already sold out. I mean, I think people are going to have to shop a lot quicker than before, and you're going to have to start to actually budget, because think about what this does to people when they think, oh, I'm going to buy, little Joe this for Christmas, and I have $50 budgeted, and now it costs you $100 or $120. That's a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you can't even get the bad kids coal this year. You got to go to Russia or China for that. We don't do coal. So now, what are you going to give the bad kids? And then I'm thinking, like, instead of a G.I. Joe, you need like a G.I. Ed. And when I was a kid, my mother got me this thing called Army Doll. Like, I was supposed to know that's not it. Like, I was going to be fooled that this was G.I. Joe. An Army Doll look, he was just a rubber body. And as soon as I took him out of the plastic container, his head came off, right? I'm like, This isn't GI, this is Army doll. So, I mean, you might have to have these interim gifts to try to pacify, to get to the gift you want. Like if you don't get the Nintendo machine, you might have to get the kids like shirts with Nintendo on it, like it's coming. I also have parents that are actually giving, they're just going away. They're like doing experience gifts. Like, hey, we're just going to go away for a weekend together. We're not going to do like a lot of big gifts under the tree kind of thing. So we'll see. It's good. Like you said, I'm glad you started though. I'm glad you started. That's a good thing. Hey, tip 4, we're going to move through these quick. Drain your flexible spending account. This is a use it or lose it account, right, Danny?
It is, yep. So much, unlike the HSA where we want you to hold those funds, the FSA flexible spending account, you're going to have to use each and every year. And so some companies will allow you to go all the way through March of the following year to spend it. Yeah. But make sure go look at your benefits plan, understand exactly what you need to do. And hopefully they're sending you guys reminders, but not every company's, the best at that. So go ahead and start using that for those expenses that you may have right now before the end of the year.
I think contributors really mess these up, and I'll tell you why. So the maximum FSA contribution is $2,750. And I see everybody max these out, and then they get in this frenzy. Like, oh, I got to spend these down. How many Q-tips you need? Like, how much Dayquil am I going to stock up on, right? Or whatever it is, because you got to really look at or crystallize your health-related expenses for 2022 if you have an FSA and you don't have a health savings account. And try not to overfund it. Try to use it for the things you actually look at. Actually, I try to suggest to people underfund it a bit to make sure you spend it or go through. I have a client that'll go through, okay, I know I need glasses next year. It's going to cost this. Like, in other words, the more recurring expenses, like I do dental visits, I know this, right? And then she almost comes to the penny. I'm amazed. And I think that's what you have to do. Use the FSA for more recurring stuff. Like, you're going to go to the dentist. You're going to get maybe new glasses. Okay, I'm going to allocate that money for that. So don't overfund these things. Don't stuff them. Plan them. Okay? Which is the opposite you want to do for your turkey, right? You want to stuff your turkey and not plan it. Tip 5, rebalance your portfolios. Oh my gosh. We take profits to share and everybody goes like, why did you sell that? Listen, we get complacent. You think markets are always going to go up? I think, Danny, I might be wrong, and I'm going to say it on this show. I think next year, is not going to be a very good year for markets. If anything, it's going to be a very disappointing, and I don't mean like a crash or anything, but it's just not going to be as smooth. And I also think international investments next year might do better than U.S. We'll have to see. You'll have to hold this to me if I'm still around next year. So, you never know around here. So the trimming profits from your best producing investments, reallocating to lesser performers. Nothing wrong with taking profits from hot investments, or maybe your portfolio's gotten out of whack and you usually have 60% in equities. Now you have 80. And you go, well, this is great. I think I'll just keep it to next year. Well, what makes you think next year is going to be like this year, right? That's that recency bias, the tire treads in your brain telling you that cycles don't change, right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So looking at the recency bias, looking at markets, you're going to have to look at things differently. And instead of just letting all these things run, you're going to need to get out there and actively manage that to some extent to mitigate any potential risk. The risks are building in the sense that we know they're going to potentially raise interest rates. We know that they've announced that they're tapering. And those are just the things that we know about right now. Think about how extended the market has been. And can companies sustain this market cap and the valuations that they're currently sitting at? That's going to be more and more difficult as we see more inflationary pressure. So are they always going to pass that on to you? Are they going to continue to shoulder the brunt of that? Probably not. So this is a kind of a vicious cycle in the sense that they're either going to take it on the chin in the market perspective because their profit margins are decreasing, or they pass it on to the consumer and they stop spending as much.
Right. So listen, I think rebalancing is a good risk management tool. It doesn't lead to maybe greater returns, but it does help you manage the risk per level of return you're looking for. If you can't do it, listen, you check out Lance's 401k fund manager. That's great. We help people manage 401k assets. You can go to RIA Pro. Listen, most important thing is when you're trimming profits and rebalancing, how nice, Danny, I am doing it from a position of strength. While the market's moving higher, I'm not rushing to preserve as markets are dropping. I'm actually doing it from the position of I have the upper hand. I can now take profits in these particular investments and rebalance. I know it feels wrong, but it's right if you managing risk is a priority for you. And that's
the number one rule.
Yeah. Risk management is important.
Buy low, sell high.
Yeah. What? That's a rule now?
Yeah.
All right. Tip 6, check your beneficiaries. Oh my gosh. I had to do this myself. I was like, I don't think I checked my beneficiaries, or I didn't have one on an IRA. Everybody does it. Check your beneficiaries on your IRA, your life insurance, retirement accounts, payable on death accounts. Man,
Every account, though, I mean, I'm helping somebody go through, the transition. They lost a loved one, and they filled out the forms, but only used it for one account, not the other. And so now one account, they're able to move it over, but the other one has to go through probate, and it's a lengthy process. So make sure you check your beneficiaries on every single account.
And what about people ignore, I think, what we call contingent or secondary beneficiaries? Hey, what if you and your spouse exit the planet at the same time? You go up with Jeff Bezos in his little rocket, and he leaves you up there. Well, I mean, you don't want assets that are needlessly transferred through, say, the probate process or left to your estate. So check your designations, do your primaries, do your secondaries, and then every 3 years, just go through them. And you might have, like you said, Danny, a life change. Something happens. Make sure, I think this is one of the easiest of the 10 smart money moves to make right now, but important.
Yep, I agree.
7 is to get your household spending budget. I know budget is a 4-letter word, and it's not love. But you want to start to put together what is your budget going to look like next year. Household spending is so easy to track. In December, and I'll talk about this again next week, if you put your spending, a lot of your spending on credit cards and pay them off, you get a really nice spending report at the end of the year. So, budgeting. I'm already working on my 2022 budget, Danny.
Good for you. You're ahead of the game.
Yeah, already working. Pen and paper, getting it down, what I'm spending money on, what I'm not spending money on anymore. Planning. It's all about the planning. Hey, this has been great. We hope you have a great weekend. Next year, thinking it's the end of the year. Next week, it's me solo. And keep in mind, sign up for the year-end economic review. Saturday, November 13th, Candid Coffee, just an hour with Danny, with me, with Mr. Roberts, burning the coffee. Next week, we hope you can sign up. Go to Real Investment Advice, sign up for the newsletter, daily commentary. See you next week. Have a great weekend, everybody. Stay warm.
It's a rich man's world.